Hello, you're watching Tell It Like It Is with public officials, and my name is Kathy Benuck. Well, as you can see right to my right, there is a face that should be familiar to you if you ever watch BCTV, never mind if you have kids in the school system, and that's Tim Mays, who's the superintendent of SAU 25, in other words, the superintendent of the Bedford schools. You know, I've gotten to know Tim a bit in the past couple of years, maybe to his dismay, I'm not sure. And then occasionally we've had conversations in which we might not have total agreement on a subject or an email back and forth in which I might have been carrying on about something. And I got to tell you this, you know, not all public officials take that well. Tim does. I can genuinely say to you that I've never seen him get ruffled, whether it was at a school board meeting or talking to people privately or whatever. He keeps his cool, and he does respond to people, and probably sometimes wishes that he didn't have that big list of emails in front of him, but he does respond, and he responds quickly, and always nicely, and always professionally, and that needs to be said, because I think all of you know that not all public officials can that be said about.
Thank you, Kathy.
Oh, you're quite welcome. And he also has a sense of humor, which probably the kids don't get to see much, because he does have to have that, you know, stern demeanor, I think, when dealing with the kids. Maybe with the staff, too. Maybe, in fact, maybe more so with the staff. I don't know. We could talk about that, but I won't put you on the spot.
They know I have a little humor.
Oh, that's good. That's good. And you know, Tim, I think a lot of people sometimes think that school administrators are just school administrators, you know, that they went off to college or university or whatever with the idea of running a school system. And I don't know. I don't even know if there are degrees and such things. But in any event, Tim did not start out as an administrator as such. He's walked the walk and talked the talk. He's been a teacher, he's been a coach, and then ultimately moved up into those management type positions. Now, he's been in Bedford as superintendent since 2001. And prior to that, he was actually the superintendent of finance in Bedford. And I'm not quite sure the years of that.
Actually, I was in Bedford as assistant superintendent of finance from about 2001.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I reversed.
Yep.
Yes, and this is your 7th year as
Yep,
superintendent.
Yep.
Okay.
Followed Ann Remus as superintendent.
So you can see my
Yep.
notes.
Oh,
Even though
there
I
you go.
printed, even though I did the nuns good printing, I
you
still, you
did.
know, sometimes look at them and go, "Whoops."
Yeah, that's all right.
Now, before he came to Bedford, he was principal of Concord High School, which is a pretty good-sized school, and before that was principal of Merrimack High School. Well, I should say the years. Concord was 97 to 2001, and then Merrimack High School, he was principal from 88 to 97. So he's also walked the walk in terms of that level of education. He knows what it is to run a school and deal with all those day-to-day problems. Altogether, he's spent 38 years in education, and as I said, he has been a teacher, he has been a sports coach, so he's been the whole route. So there's probably not a whole lot that he hasn't heard in all those years from a parent, from a teacher, from a student, or whatever. He is a Bedford resident, and his wife Karen is also a teacher. In fact, she's a special ed teacher over in Amherst, and they have a grown son, a grown daughter, and if I'm not mistaken, you might be a recent grandpa?
I am. I have a Charlie, a grandson, 2 years old.
Wow.
Keeping us busy.
Oh, yeah. They're fun, though, isn't it?
Especially when I give it back to Brett.
This is true. And you know what? My experience is it's so different than your own kids. I don't know if it's because you have more time or what it is, or older and wiser, but it is different.
I realize that it's their child, not mine.
This is true.
Although you try to influence it a little bit.
You
right?
do.
Yeah.
You do, as much as you can and get away with.
Yeah, that's true.
But obviously, when the little darling starts to act up, it's time to send them home.
or we're tired.
Oh, there you go.
One or the other.
Well, Tim has pretty much given me an open field in terms of questions. How do you like that? And I don't know. I don't know if that was a safe thing for you to do or not. I've been known to get people a little worked up.
That's all right.
You know. And we will talk about the budget, because hopefully by now you have already seen a show that was done last week with school board members Cindy Shagnon and Scott Earnshaw, as well as the president of the Bedford Teachers Association, Nate Feldman. And I do say association so that people understand it's not a union. And at that point, we talked about the aspect of the budget that dealt with the teacher pay raise and the new 2-year contract. And on that show, I said that Tim would be meeting this week with me, and we'd get into some of the budget stuff, which we will. But there's always lots of subjects that people talk about when it comes to the school system, whether they have kids in the schools or not, because all of us obviously have an investment in it, and all of us recognize our civic responsibility to education. One of the issues that, and not just in Bedford certainly, but everywhere in the country, that has really been on people's minds is security in schools. And I think that ever since the horrible thing that we saw down at Sandy Hook in Connecticut, it's on people's minds more and more. Now, I know that this is nothing new in Bedford. I know that for several years, you've been doing things to make the schools very secure, and I believe since then have even implemented some additional things and probably have things for the future. Again, I mean, parents probably know, but the folks who don't have kids in the schools probably wonder, what do we have in the schools? Yeah, so, maybe you want to talk about that a bit.
I can talk a little bit about that, sure. So I think it's good to go back a little bit in history.
Yeah.
Around the time we were building the high school, middle school, we were implementing some things at both schools, Lergio and at the high school, that were safety security oriented. One of them being access control to the school. That is, once school starts, we lock the school down, and you have minimal entrances to the school, so you have a controlled access. And we didn't have that in our other schools at that time.
Right.
So got us thinking about, all right, so how it's going to be a little inconsistent. I didn't think people were going to feel good about that. So we did have a consultant come in and look at all of our schools and do an assessment of our practices. They observed how we were having people come in and out of schools, how we were releasing kids in the afternoon, and they completed a report, which is still on our website if they were to go on our website. But there were between, say, 9 and 12 recommendations that they said, here, you need to get after these things. These are the priorities. And so I think what the community should know is that we've done all of those things.
Oh, great.
So some of them would be simple things like ID badges for all the employees, so that if you're walking around and you see an adult in the building and they don't have an ID,
somebody needs to ask who they are.
Who are you?
Yeah.
And let me take you down to the office.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's
Makes
a teacher
sense.
who's not wearing their badge.
It'd be a little embarrassing.
Yeah,
I'd
it
be
is,
brought
but-
down to the principal.
Right. But that's what should happen. Right?
Yeah.
We installed the access control at every school. What was unique was that all the schools are a little different, and so that has to be different in every school. So Memorials is a little different than Peter Woodbury's, which is a little different than Riddlebrook, but we made it work. Some feedback from the field, what teachers were saying, that if we had an intruder, they had to actually reach outside the classrooms to lock their
lock the door.
doors, right?
Yeah.
And so we've...
And that's common, I think, huh? In schools, or it was.
In the old days,
Yeah.
yes. So now they've got locks that you can lock from either
Inside.
side. And so we have swapped out for all classrooms in all buildings that kind of hardware.
That's good.
Took us 3 or 4 years to do it, but we've got that done.
Did any of the kids ever do it to be funny?
Well, you kind of sort of need a key, so they don't have a key. So,
okay. All right.
so
Not just a little switch.
Well, kids don't do it necessarily, but you would. So now I know what you were doing in school, right?
Well,
you were doing that.
I'm not going to make all my confessions today. I might make one or two.
There you go. So that was, I think, important for people to know, is that those kinds of recommendations we took very seriously. We got after. We took care of them probably in 3 or 4 years. And now...
And that's not a cheap thing to do.
No, it's not. Another important piece is once the building's locked down during the day, there are only certain doors that have access, and there's a card reader at these doors, and only people who have the authorized card can scan it, open the door. So coming in and out from recess or at lunchtime,
Right.
very much better process than we did before. We structured our dismissals at the end of the day, so there's better accountability for kids. So a lot of things done. I think that the part that the message I guess I'd want to give to parents is that I'm not sure that any of that would have changed the Sandy Hook experience.
No, I know that.
Experience,
Everybody
because in
knows
fact
that, yeah.
they had done a lot
Yeah, I know.
in that school district
I know.
to do that. But by practicing certain drills,
Yeah.
by putting in the locks in place, you're doing everything possible
Right.
to make the school as safe and secure as you can.
Right, and it makes people more aware, too,
right.
of potential disaster, so to speak.
We've talked to our staff about the need that they may, in an emergency, have to make some decisions that are common sense decisions that deviate from protocols
Sure.
because it's the right thing to do, and
Sure.
we got to give them permission to do that. So,
Sure.
I think we've done a lot to make people feel secure. Here's just one statistic. So I read this the other day. The chances of getting hit by lightning, 1 in 3 million. And the chances of being involved in a school shooting, higher than that.
Really?
So I think the thing to walk
Except
away from...
it just makes the news so much
It
that
does.
obviously
it's rare.
people panic.
It's
yeah.
rare,
Yeah.
and the odds are it's not going to happen.
And of course, Connecticut was even more frightening because of the numbers involved.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, people were just stunned, blown
Horrible.
away by it. Yeah.
So I want to reassure people
Yeah.
that it's
Oh, yeah.
not a regular occurrence. We're doing everything we can to be prepared for it. So.
Well, I mean, I can attest just to my own, experience. If I've had occasion to run into one of the schools at any time, or even when I was subbing, I had a buzz and identified myself before I could get into the building, and then somebody really was checking who I was. And when I did sub, I noticed that in every classroom, in that area by the door where the emergency information is and so on, there are very clear instructions as to what whatever adult is in that classroom is supposed to do if there are various situations. I mean, up to and including that if somebody is in the building and the kids need to be protected, how best to do that,
Right.
Inside the classroom, those kind of things, the practical things that maybe somebody might not think of unless they did see it saying, do this, do this, do this, do this.
We practice drills.
I bet you do,
For
yeah.
all of those
Yeah.
different occurrences. We have a thing called, a drill called Secure in Place. We have a drill called Lockdown. Those
And the
are
police have been involved in some of those, correct?
Yeah, we've had both state and local police at the high school, middle school, where they practice during the summer drills in case there was an intruder
Sure.
in the school, so they're familiar.
Sure.
We welcome them coming in because now they're familiar with our building.
The building.
Yeah, so I think that's a
because
good
I mean, big buildings,
We did the same thing in Concord, which is
Yeah.
a bigger building.
Yeah.
So it's good to be a good neighbor to the local authorities. So I think the bottom line is that what's been helpful is we've had some additional conversations since the tragedy occurred. It's reminded us to make sure we're doing everything we should be doing. I think we got a little lax, a little bit on the buzzing in, and so it's caused us to be a little bit better.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, I mean, and again, I've seen firsthand. I mean, even things like when the kids get out of school, teachers are there, making sure they're getting on the right buses and that nobody's around in the schoolyard in a car or whatever trying to accost one of the kids or approach one of the kids or whatever. The staff is out there.
Yep.
And I mean, basically, there's that all clear that all the school buses got to be loaded and the kids out of the building before all the adults start trotting out.
They take it very seriously.
They do. Yeah, they do. They absolutely do. One of the things, and of course everybody in town, no matter how long they've lived here, probably everybody knows the McKelvey School. It would be the most known for many reasons, the events held there, the fact that it used to be a polling spot and so on. And obviously McKelvey's getting older and showing signs of age, unlike you and me, of course, who never show a sign of age.
That's right.
And lots of
noticing
updates. Well, yeah, but I mean, I didn't hear you give me back an equal compliment.
Oh, you look very nice today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, you almost lost that opportunity. You know what I mean? I gave
Thank
you the
you.
opening,
I
and you
know.
didn't respond
I know.
fast. Anyway,
I'll be faster next time.
McKelvey obviously, needs updates and it's showing its sign of age. I know it's an ongoing project, so for those folks who don't read school board minutes, or watch the school board, or pay attention, why don't you talk a little bit about what's already been done, what's going to happen via the proposed budget,
Okay.
and what's next after that?
Well, one of the things that we've tried to do recently at McKelvey is the building's 55, 60 years old, and it originally was built with electric heat. So there was a lot of electricity going into the building. And out by the county
the cost
road...
of that today?
I know, I know. Outside of the county road side, there was, I think you saw some transformers that are out there. That's called, so that's the main service of electricity to the building. and that particular switch gear is what it's called. They don't make parts for anymore. So if something were to go for that, we would have to have it manufactured, which might take 1 or 2 weeks, which we've had to do on occasion several years ago. Thank God it was during the summer. So last year we replaced the main supply of electricity coming into the building, so that's now current.
Oh, that's what all those trucks were out there for every
this
day.
summer. Yep.
Ah,
So
okay.
this year, we're going to, inside the building, we're going to take all the main panels and distribution of electricity in the building and update those as well, and get rid of some of the old wiring that was used for electric heat, which is no longer used. So that will remove a big electrical issue that we've had fear of losing during the school year, which would have been bad.
Yeah.
So what's proposed next year is to begin a multi-year project of improving parking, improving drainage, which is very important. There's no drainage hardly on the site. There's two storm drains
That's all?
on the site, way over on the southern side of the building.
Does that cause problems?
Well, it's wet, and especially in the spring. If you got a lot of standing water or the water table's up,
that's not
you have a damp building.
Yeah.
And although we've put ventilation into it, it's not good to have too much moisture in the building.
Well, no,
So
you get mold and everything else.
that's a possibility. Although we've checked it, and it tests properly every time we've checked it, but
that's good.
it's a concern. So we're going to start behind the building, and what we're proposing is to improve the parking and traffic flow and the drainage behind. There's an oil tank that's near its useful life. We're going to replace that. And then come around on the county roadside and do the same thing. Change the access to County Road so that the traffic flows in on one entrance and flows out on the other, but also allows longer stacking on County Road so you don't get the log jams as
that'll
much.
help.
And so that's proposed for next year, and hopefully then subsequent years we can work our way around the building. We've worked with the town to have them look at our plans to make sure that it meshes well with the traffic flow, because that is, as you know, it's a tough intersection.
It is. It's brutal.
So anything we can do to elongate stacking on site and in the road there would be helpful, and that's what I think we're doing. And
Every so often the town talks about putting an actual traffic light there.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that'd improve or make it worse. I personally would not like to see it there, but I don't think they'll ask me
You
first.
still need to be careful.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
There's always accidents out there.
I think what this will do is the traffic flow and the pedestrian flow of kids and adults on campus will be much safer. And I think the traffic on and off the site will be much safer. And I think getting the water off the site will also be good.
Now, is the roof project all done now?
We've done most of the roofs. There's none scheduled for next year. We have a maintenance plan, and so we're trying to do that over time.
Yeah.
And so we've just finished Peter Woodbury last year. And
I remember,
it'll be a few years before we get back at it, but not too many.
Now, are there any other school buildings that need anything significant right now that's on tap?
Not compared to McKelvey. We're doing a ventilation project at Memorial next year, but it pales in comparison to that.
Well,
So-
McKelvey's the oldest school.
It is. Well, Memorial's, we put a lot of money into Memorial over the last 5 or 6 years, and so that's in a pretty good spot. Their campus is in good shape. Most of their ventilation and electrical equipment's in good shape. Probably the only thing that could be done there at this point is upgrading bathrooms, which are 40 or 50 or 60 years old, but that's not as high a priority as McKelvey.
Well, until they burst, I guess. Huh?
True.
Which will happen someday. Hopefully not before they're repaired.
I think that the important thing to note is that if you don't take care of the facilities, just like if you don't take care of your home, things are going to happen.
That's right.
And in this case, it's a safety issue in some part because of the traffic flow and kids, but there's other issues about water getting into the basements of the building.
That's just plain bad.
You just got to take care of that stuff.
Yeah, that's just plain bad.
And we've tried to do it over multiple years so that it's not hitting the taxpayer at the same time. We tried 2 or 3 years ago to do a bond for that. I thought we had a pretty good business case. Our timing was probably bad because that was just when the recession hit, and just the way it is.
I know.
Right? So we're doing our next best thing, which is to look at how we do it over year and keep it within a reasonable amount of costs.
one of the things that, and I'm trying to think if it came up at the deliberative session the other night. I sort of think it did from somebody who was not happy about an item or another. But but there weren't many.
Nope.
I mean, you guys got off pretty easy the other night, actually.
Well, I thought it was good for us to be talking about educational standards rather than a myriad of other things we could be talking about.
Just as an aside, before I ask you about the deliberative session, I did tell you in conversation on the phone that it's a wonder you didn't see my body kind of go flying up into the air, because I got so aggravated toward the end of the meeting when a certain person got up to the microphone and, instead of sticking with the business of the deliberative session, started carrying on about legislation in the State House now that would repeal legislation passed last year dealing with the business tax credit to contribute to scholarships for folks that might want their kids to go to a charter school or whatever rather than the local public school system. And obviously everybody's entitled to their point of view on it. And I mean, there's no question it is kind of one of those partisan issues, because the Republicans last year were very strong on it because they had a majority past it. The Democrats didn't like it. This year the Democrats have the majority, so they kind of want to turn it around. Understood. And I mean, I was aggravated because A, I didn't think the subject should have come up at the deliberative session, and B, I didn't go to the meeting to listen to a Democratic platform piece, which is what I said to you.
That is what you said to me.
It is, exactly. and if I think I might have said it with a little bit of vigor,
I think you
too.
did.
Yes, I think I did. And, you know, I mean, what kind of ticked me off, seriously, was that the moderator did not, like, say, out of order, or whatever words he would have to use. And when he failed to do so, I was kind of looking at the stage going, you know, like this, that somebody on the school board or administration might have said, excuse me, great subject, but not the subject of tonight. And I just had to say that to you, you know, because I've been known to blog on such issues, so this way you won't be surprised if you see me carrying on in a blog or whatever. No, I'm not expecting a comment from you. I just had to put my 2 cents in.
I
you
feel
know?
as though you should be able to do that.
I told you, he takes all the comments. Amazing. But anyway, as you know, and I mean this isn't you know, limited to Bedford, certainly, in every city or town, a lot of people carry on, and much is said about the average number of students in the classroom, and we're certainly seeing vigorous debates going on in Manchester over that because their class sizes are so large. And obviously, kind of with that is the, you know, teacher-student ratio and so on. So, having said all that, how does Bedford compare to other communities in terms of that? And how is average class determined? Because I think you know, and this is what I think might have got said the other night. Some people will say, well, look at the high school. You know, you can see some of those classes that are only a few kids are in, and they kind of get themselves worked up over that. So how do you know, again, how do we compare to other communities, when I'm suspecting probably pretty good, and how is that average class size determined? Because obviously, and we all understand, some classes are going to have more kids than others. I mean, from what I've seen with the younger grades, the class sizes are pretty full. But of course, they're not changing, you know, constantly to all different types of options that obviously the high school kids would have.
Well, the complexity of the schedule does impact that.
I'm sure. Yeah.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. As you know, I talked about this at the deliberative session, so I'll try to be concise. But there's 2 metrics that I think people use or throw around in conversations when it comes to class size and student-teacher ratio. So I think I mentioned the other night that student-teacher ratio, as collected by the Department of Education in New Hampshire, is basically taking all of the classroom teachers, so that would be your first grade teachers, your second grade teachers, your art teachers, music, PE, math, science, all those kinds of teachers.
And what, divide by the number of kids
Well,
in the
they'd
system?
also add in special education teachers. So that would be, in our district, resource teachers, skilled teachers are the names we use. People who do teach in self-contained programs for students who are severely disabled. All those get counted, added up, and then they divide that into how many kids are in grades 1 through 12. And they do that.
So that wouldn't really be a real true figure.
Well, it's close.
Yeah,
But at least
but-
the methodology
yeah,
is the
yeah.
same. The only guidance counselors don't teach classes.
Right.
Reading specialists don't necessarily teach
They're
classes.
working one-on-one, right?
Principals don't
No,
teach classes.
no.
So they're
Right.
not counted.
Right.
So it's not a bad metric. And so they actually figure out what that ratio is. And for ours for this year is 14.2 to 1.
Okay.
The thing to remember is that is not class size.
Right.
That is
No, I
comparing
know that.
those
yeah.
two numbers.
I know that.
The metric, I think when you give it some context,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is important, and you compare that to the other 161 school districts in New Hampshire,
Mm-hmm.
that is the 9th highest student-teacher ratio in the state of New Hampshire. And
Highest or best?
highest,
Highest.
meaning that it has more students per teacher
Okay.
than other districts.
Okay. Good thing
The-
you said that,
right.
because some people might think highest means best of,
The
you know,
lower,
best
lower
of
the
scoring.
right, the
you know?
lower the student-teacher ratio, that means you got fewer kids per
Okay.
teacher.
Okay.
Right, so that's
Yep.
that would be you'd have more staff. Higher, the less staff. And so
Okay.
one of the things I've said, even though people may disagree with this, is comparatively speaking, when you give it context, I think Bedford is pretty lean in its staffing
Okay.
as compared to others, and there's a metric that actually bears that out.
Okay.
And we're not in the middle. You know, we're 9th highest out of 161. Class size, you know, our district has guidelines. The board establishes what limitations I have in order to build our staffing, and we follow those pretty rigidly. You know, that's the expectation they have of me. So at our elementary schools, our classes average 21 to 22, with kindergarten being a little bit lower. It's 18
yeah.
to 19.
Well, yeah, that's understandable.
Which it is. Grades 5 through 8, our average class sizes for the core subject areas are around 25, actually 24 to 25. And at the high school,
Sometimes bigger, I think.
could be.
Yeah, because
Again,
I know when I subbed at the Lurgio, I
it
was
ranges.
surprised sometimes at the number of kids
Right, so
coming
it
in.
ranges, it's average, right?
Yeah.
So you're going to have
Yeah.
some that are lower and some that
Yeah.
are higher. High school average is around 22.
Okay.
The question about, do you have small classes at the high school? Yes. So we run a handful, I'd say 10 to 15, that I would say would be considered small. And I would say small being 5 to 15. And it's just a sequential course that we're committed to the program. I'll give an example. Mandarin. We
Okay.
offer Mandarin.
All right.
And our numbers have been okay at the first and second year, but when you get into the third and fourth year, they've been relatively small.
Kids are just dropping out, losing interest or whatever.
It's hard.
Yeah. Well,
and so it's whether or not they elect
yeah.
in.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
we've-
because those are all by choice courses.
right,
Yeah.
right. So we're committed to the 4-year experience to prepare kids for college, because if they're going to take that language, you want them to get that on their transcript to be eligible for a competitive school. So what we've done to try to address that is to allow middle school students at Lurgio
Oh, I saw that.
to take Mandarin and Latin
Yeah.
when there's seats available to
Yeah.
kind of fill in.
How's
where
that working out? Are many doing it?
A lot of doing
Yeah?
it. And in fact, we actually had to turn some away this year
No
because we
kidding.
didn't have open seats.
Wow.
So
No, are these the kids that are really the students, you know, the really motivated students, or
well, you know, it depends. I
the
think
honor roll kids, or
some of them.
Some of
I
them,
really
yeah.
don't know
Yeah,
whether
yeah,
it's the.
yeah.
Because I think it's kids who are interested in taking a language other than French and Spanish, which are
Mm-hmm.
the predominant languages at the middle school. And since the two facilities are right next to each
I
other,
know,
we thought
yeah.
it was a nice way to
Yeah.
give them access to Latin and
Yeah.
Mandarin. But
well, Latin's the mother language.
yes, it is. I took it myself.
I did too. I
you
had
go.
to. I had no choice in the matter. I went to parochial. Latin
I
was
know.
part of the drill, you know.
I get it.
But you know what? It was a great teacher of the whole English language, as well as a help with other languages
It
because
certainly
of the
helps you with
roots.
vocabulary.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
writing. But to get back to your original point, class size is a totally different measure than student-teacher ratio. And I would say on the,
Do you think people understand that?
no,
I don't either.
no, they don't. And that's why I was trying to clarify that.
Yeah.
Because I think if you just think 14 to 1 and you think that's class size, it isn't class size.
Yeah, and that's what would
Part of
get
that
people
is the
worked up,
delivery
yeah.
of special education
Yeah.
is such that you have a lot of educators who are providing support to kids with disabilities in the classroom, but also in small groups, trying to get them up to speed, up to grade level in the areas in which their disability limits that.
Sure.
And so that's harder to do in a class of 24
Oh,
or
God,
25.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
we provide the support when we can.
Yeah.
And then when they need the additional supports outside that, within the confines or the IEP for the student, that's where it's done in small groups or individually if it needs to be. That impacts that ratio that we were just talking about, but doesn't impact class size. And you can see there's a great discrepancy
Yeah,
between
there
the
is,
two.
yeah.
I think it's a little misleading
Yeah, it
to
is.
give pupil-teacher ratio and imply that that's class size, because that's not what the case is.
Now, I have to play the devil's advocate.
All right.
You know that.
Yep.
So what if now, say for instance, Mandarin or any other subject, that it reached a point where you saw, and you probably wouldn't cancel it right away, you know, with no notice to anybody, but say you reached a point where successively you were only seeing 2, 3, 4 kids sign up for that course. At that point, is the school board, or are you going to suggest to the school board, you know what, this is not, you know, how we should spend the money. We've got to dump this course because there just is not enough interest. Or
Well,
is
we
a
do
course
that-
kind of into perpetuity no matter
No.
what?
In fact, if people were watching the shows in November or December when we were looking at the program of studies, courses that don't, kids speak by their feet, so they don't
Yeah.
sign up for classes that don't meet their needs. We pull them out, and so there were 3, 4, 5 classes that we pulled out this year from the program of studies because the kids just weren't taking them, and so they're no longer relevant or weren't providing the bang for the buck for the kids, so we just don't offer them.
Okay.
Mandarin, we had a conversation 2 or 3 years ago. We noticed that the enrollments in the second, third, and fourth year were small. So we had the conversation about whether we should keep it or not. And
I sort of remember that.
ultimately,
Yeah.
the board chose to keep it, and so our response was, okay, so how can we increase the opportunity for kids to get in that, and hence the opportunity for middle school students to take part in that, to kind of fill in the gaps for where high school kids weren't doing it, was our attempt to make it, again, a good bang for the buck that,
Sure.
you know, for the taxpayer. So, no, nothing's in place if it's not serving a useful purpose for the kid.
Okay, people need to hear that.
Yep.
Okay. Now, you know, everybody reads about the costs of schools in other towns. Some are higher, some are lower than Bedford, I assume. But, you know, we've heard, whether or not it's true or it's not true, you do know that there's a certain segment of the Bedford population that throws up their hands and thinks that Bedford is higher than everybody and they made a mistake moving here or what have you. And how does our student population compare to other school districts, and how much legitimately is a school's budget kind of related to the number of kids in the system?
Well, that's a complex question. It's
It
a good
is.
question. So now that I've been in Bedford working here for 11, 12 years,
Yeah,
whatever it's been,
yeah.
I've had a chance to watch the district and the town grow. And so I guess it might surprise you to know that Bedford is the 6th largest school district, single school district in the state of New Hampshire.
It is the 6th?
6th largest.
Wow. Who's ahead? Well, Manchester, obviously. Nashua?
Manchester, Nashua, Concord, Londonderry.
Concord, really?
Concord, Londonderry, Rochester, New Hampshire, and then Bedford.
Londonderry, too? Of
Yep.
course, Londonderry's had huge growth, but I didn't realize it was
Yeah.
bigger than,
So I
the
know
system was bigger than
I
Bedford's.
know this is probably. I just want to.
Oh, you
be
love
accurate.
slides. I know.
I'm not gonna. I do love slides.
I would be shocked if we didn't on this show have at least a couple slides. I'd probably fall over dead.
So one of the one of the things I want to mention is that the top 10 largest school districts in New Hampshire, of which we're the 6th,
Yeah.
all 10, except for Bedford, have declined in enrollments since in the last 10 years. I'll just give you a couple. So Londonderry
Yeah.
was.
They all went down?
They've dropped 1,060 students in the last 10 years.
Really?
Concord has dropped
what accounts for that?
529. The cohorts of kids in that community are just shrinking because of fewer births, fewer people moving in. A number of factors impact that. 529 in
Growing up,
Concord.
of course, being
Yep.
in the school system.
Salem, 1,149 fewer kids than 10 years ago.
Salem, yeah.
Yeah. Bedford increased by 738.
We did.
So we're the only one that's grown.
Now, is that because of big housing developments like Greenfield Farms or whatever?
I think
I
so.
mean, that must have put a lot of
it's
kids in
factor
the
of
system.
that. So I guess one of the things I've come to realize is that we have grown tremendously in the last 10 or 15 years, and so has the school district. And so when people reflect back and say, I can remember when the budget used to be $27 million and now it's $60 million. And I say, yep, you're right. We now have our own high school, middle school, but we also have 700 to 1,000 more kids. That's not inconsequential.
No, of course not.
And so
Of course not.
there's associated costs with that. But on the same token, I think as you talked about, and as I share with the community many times, when you look at our per pupil costs and how that compares to other districts, we're below state average and very favorable when you compare us to either demographically similar communities or communities that are our same size. I try to just go a little bit south to Merrimack. Their cost per pupil is greater than us by 2,000 or 3,000 at the elementary, middle, and high school student
There's that
level.
much of a discrepancy.
Yet,
Wow.
yet they're about 300 kids less than us. You know, and you can draw your own conclusions in terms of budgets as well. So we are a big school district, whether
Yeah,
we
yeah.
want to know it or not, whether people believe
What's
it
the
or
number
not.
now?
We're over 4,400 kids.
There's that many.
Here's an example. People want to be here. We've added 53 students since the start of school to the school district
This year?
thus far. 50,
Just in September?
yes.
Wow. I didn't
And-
realize that was that high.
Right. So I get calls regularly, as do I'm sure principals do, by parents who are looking to relocate into the area, and they want to know about the schools. They've read about things. They go online. There's a lot of information that's available. And this is a place where people do want to live, and a good reason is the schools. And so that is, as a homeowner, as we both homeowners, that's a good thing to have happening when you go if you ever go to sell your home, that people want to move here.
On that, and this is like a wild card question for you. I've got to give you one now and then.
Go.
Now, you said 53 kids.
Actually, it's 56, I think.
56,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
53, 56.
And you would know more about this than I would, absolutely, because you're an educator. And not only that, but your wife herself works in special education. And I don't know, I mean, it seems as though there's statistics, government statistics for everything, no matter what it is. You know, how many people have big feet and how many people don't in a population of whatever. And I
have no idea where you're going with this. That's good.
Oh, good, all right. So I'm sure that there's some type of a statistic that, population-wise, I mean, for instance, and just so you know, I haven't gone crazy, there is a way, for example, to look at a community and based on its size, come up with a pretty close estimate of how many people who live in that community have diabetes. I mean, this is how refined some of these numbers are, and it's amazing how close it can come. So I'm kind of guessing that somewhere, some government agency or educational agency or whatever must have some kind of number in terms of, in a town of X amount of a population range, the percentage of kids needing special education. And I'm talking now, and again, I'm not going to use the right terminology because this is, not something I have a lot of knowledge of. I'm not talking special education that they might need some reading help or things like that. But the kids that are in more serious
identified
needs.
learning disability.
Yes, who are in more serious needs, whether it's because of behavioral or physical or whatever, problems. And somewhere there must be some numbers that would say for an average population of 20,000, for example, there's a likelihood that there would be X amount of kids who would need these more complicated services. And again, and I have no statistical data or anything else on this, but it kind of seems for a community, and let me backtrack too, that obviously some of the problems that some of these kids would have to some degree might be related to their economic status, socio-status, and so on, because, for instance, they were born prematurely because mama took drugs or something, and the child wound up with some problems. So for a town like of our wealth and education factors and all that thrown in, it kind of seems like we have a lot of kids who need some real special services. Where I'm going with this is, with Bedford School reputation as being so good, and I have a sneaking suspicion that probably our special services are considered to be superior to a lot of school systems. Are we having people moving in, maybe even as renters in some of the big apartment complexes and so on, for the sole purpose of being able to take advantage of that special education, which, of course, as you know, is a huge cost driver?
Right. Well, I'm going to give you some statistics
Am I
back.
bad,
Surprise, surprise.
I knew you'd have some.
Well, I would say the answer to your question is, do people move here sometimes because of special ed services?
Yeah, not because they particularly want to live in Bedford,
Well,
or they're planning on staying here and having a good home investment.
I think the answer to that question is yes.
You do?
Sure.
So it's not my imagination.
Just like it is for kids who have no learning disabilities, they want to move to Bedford because they believe they have access to opportunity.
True, but some of these people are going to stay forever.
Right. So let me give you some statistics.
Yeah. Okay.
So in New Hampshire,
yes,
and if you look at the identified population, those students in schools,
yes,
public schools, where they have an identified learning disability,
yep,
it's about 13%
of any population.
About.
Okay.
Now, some districts are more, and some districts are
no,
less.
but I mean, is that the standard?
That's about average,
regardless of the economic status
it's
and such
average
of the
in
town.
New Hampshire.
Okay. Oh, in New Hampshire.
Yep.
Okay.
So we're slightly below that. We're somewhere, depending on the year, probably 11 to 12% of our student population has an identified disability. So we're slightly below average, but
and does
I would
that
say
include the mild disabilities?
everybody, anyone with
total.
with an IEP.
Okay.
So that being said, so do people move here? Yes. But does that create, say, an overabundance of students with disabilities whose costs are, on average, greater than the typical kid?
Yeah.
Well, not if we have less than the average number, I think, in the state. So part of that is we manage that process. This is a difficult balance.
I'm sure.
Because you're trying to be very fair to the student and the family, but at the same time follow the law and provide the services that you're required to provide,
right,
and not provide above and beyond what you're required to do, but be fair. That's a very tight rope to walk.
I would bet.
And so Kathy Conlon, who's our Director of Special Services, and many others, I think, do a very good job of trying to walk that balance between doing what's right, but also being mindful of the store, and obviously that's the taxpayer. But I think where you were going with that, do we have a higher than average number? No, we don't.
Okay.
No.
And now,
but
on
it is.
that same
But
question,
special education is a very costly service.
Yes, it is.
Everywhere.
Yes. Oh, everywhere. I know that. Yeah, I'm not saying otherwise.
And it's labor intensive.
Yes, it is.
And it's rule intensive.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that you need to do because of the federal government and its regulations that we need to do, and that's just the way it is.
Now, another wild card question related to.
But I'll give you an example, going back to some of your earlier questions.
Yeah.
So by law, we're required to provide an early education program for every kid who has a learning disability from 3 to 5 prior to starting kindergarten.
Okay.
It's called BEEP, the Bedford Early Education Program. So we have routinely had anywhere from, I would say, 70 to 80 students in that program who have learning disabilities. This year we have 50.
Really?
And so what we're doing for next year is, we're reducing the staffing in the program because we've got fewer kids. And being mindful of resources, we're changing the whole supervision of those special education programs for the elementary schools and the preschool, so that we can save about $40,000. So when the enrollments don't warrant staffing, we change it.
Well, that's something I'm curious about.
Yeah. So there's an example.
And I'm going to ask you the questions
I know.
I'm curious about too.
So again, and where the enrollments require more resources, that's what we're trying to be very transparent about that.
Now, here's another curious question from Kathy. Being a Massachusetts native, of course, I still follow things that go on down there. And many, 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 many exposés, whatever you want to call them, when there's a city with some problems, you know, with education, whether it be people don't like what's going on or the class sizes are big or whatever, you know, just like with Manchester, that a lot of people who live there are upset over class sizes and such. In Massachusetts, a lot of people have been caught kind of sneaking into a school district, a neighboring suburban school district that was better, by giving a false address or a relative's address or whatever, so that they appeared to be residents. Have we had any situations like that you know of in Bedford?
I unfortunately constantly are dealing with a handful that come to our attention where a family has, let's just say their living circumstances have changed and they haven't been as forthright as they should. How's that?
They kind of
It's a
fib a little bit,
nice way of saying it?
Yes.
So
Now what happens? Do you throw them out?
well, the answer to that is we relocate them to the district that they're responsible for if we, in fact, know that that's their circumstances.
No matter what kind of sad story they give you?
In rare occasions, we've made exceptions. There was a situation several years ago. I had a student that had been placed in a home as part of a court case. And we
like foster home.
We made an exception for that student.
Yeah, that's not the kid's fault.
Nope, it's not. Yeah. And so, but ultimately...
And for some of those kids, the only constant in their life is school.
Right.
You know, they don't have the family constant or the living constant or whatever.
Had a family the other day that we had a conversation with, and they ended up relocating back to the community in Bedford because they weren't. I think you just have to be diligent and respectful. But clear. There are rules, and you follow the rules as they're, well, not rules, laws about residency in New Hampshire. The difficult part...
Well, there should be, obviously.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not up to us to pay for somebody else's kids, you know?
It isn't. And that's how I talk about this. But the difficult part of it is not everyone comes forward and tells you what their circumstances are, and sometimes you get it second, third hand. We do have a truant officer that we use, Spike Donahue, who is a truant officer that may go out and observe potential residences to make sure that, in fact, they are.
Good.
And then when we find out information that would lead us otherwise, we try to act on it. Does that mean that...
Oh, good. So I don't have to show up there with my pitchfork on that issue, right?
No, but I think it's important to know that, do we catch them all? I would.
Well,
probably not.
No, I know.
But
I know.
we try to
I'm
be
sure some people
responsible.
skirt it too, that, you know, the kid, for some reason or other, is living with grandma this year or what have you. And grandma is a legal resident of Bedford. I mean, it probably happens.
But the law is that the parent has
I know.
to be the resident, not the grandmother.
I know.
So
I know that.
I have, it takes time, but if you're consistent and fair with the information when you get it, then I think we're doing, I can honestly say to you, I feel pretty confident that we're after those that we're aware of, and we try to do what's right, and in most cases...
Well, I didn't know if it was just a Massachusetts thing or if we, you know, ran into it here too. Okay. Oh, we're going far afield, which is good. We're bringing up stuff today that people don't usually get to hear.